Warning, this podcast contains descriptions of murder, torture and abuse. As a result, it may not be suitable for everybody. Detroit, Michigan, USA. Birthplace of the US automobile industry, home to the big three auto manufacturers Ford, Fiat, Chrysler and General Motors. Detroit boasts the largest black majority population anywhere in the US. Listen to the Hometown Murders Part 1, 3 cases of the Algiers Motel incident during the 1967 race riots, Benjamin Atkins, who raped, tortured and murdered 11 women, and lastly, the Robinson family that were brutally murdered, otherwise known as the Good Hart murders. Thank you for anybody listening to Hometown Murders. Just before we start, like last week, you have some homework. Please share, like, subscribe and review. Leave us a 5-star rating and a really good review. That would be very much appreciated. Tell your friends, pass on the podcast to anybody who's not listening. Let us grow this podcast, and it really does help and appreciate it. Thank you. Now, part 1 of Detroit. The first murder we're going to is during the 1967 race riots and the Algiers Motel incident. It occurred throughout the night of July 25th to the 26th in 1967 during the racially charged 12th Street riot. The Algiers Motel was approximately 1 mile east of where the riot began. 3 civilians were killed and 9 others abused by a riot task force composed of Detroit's police department, the Michigan State Police and the Michigan Army National Guard. Among the casualties were 3 black teenage boys killed and 2 white women and 7 black men wounded as a result. The task force was searching the area after reports were received that a gunman or a group of gunmen with possibly snipers with them had been seen at or near the motel. 1 death was never been explained as the body was allegedly found by responding officers. 2 deaths have been attributed to justifiable homicide or self-defense. Charges of felonious assault, conspiracy, murder and conspiracy to commit civil rights abuse were filed against 3 officers. Charges of assault and conspiracy was also filed on a private security guard. All were found not guilty. The 12th Street riot began in the early morning hours of Sunday, July 23rd, 1967. The Detroit Police Department at the time were 93% white, and of whom 45 working in black neighbourhoods were considered to be extremely anti-black. An additional 34% were prejudiced. The riot began after police raided a black-owned business that hosted a blind pig, which is an illegal bar, during a party to celebrate the safe return of 2 black Vietnam War veterans. Police had expected a small number of patrons, however there were 85 or more inside. As the dozens of partygoers were being loaded into police vans, a mob of people formed around the scene. One of the sons of the blind pig's owners jumped on the roof of a car and threw a bottle at the police, and the mob followed suit. In the ensuing violence, numerous businesses were looted or burnt down as the riot spread to other districts of Detroit. At first, police officers were ordered to hold back from the responding riot and to prevent an escalation in violence. After a curfew was imposed and many people in Detroit stayed home or took shelter. Detroit Fire Department personnel were held back from the fires by looters throwing objects at them or by snipers. Michigan Army National Guardsmen were activated by the Michigan government and were patrolling the streets and guarding several large businesses. Michigan State Troopers and United States Army paratroopers were also deployed to patrol the streets. The Algiers Motel at 8301 Woodward Avenue near the Virginia Park District was a black-owned business owned by St. Gant and McCurrent Pye. It was one of three of motels in Detroit owned by Gant and Pye, the others being Alamo at the Alfred and Woodford, and the Rio Grande at West Grand near Grand River. Prior to Gant and Pye's purchase in 1965, the motel's white owner had barred black people from staying at the motel. The Algiers was considered by the police to be a centre of illegal drugs and prostitution and was raided regularly by the Vice Squad. It was located close to the then headquarters of General Motors, and executives of the firm were regular customers. To the rear of the motel, a three-storey detached home known as the Manor House or Annex was also rented to clients. Its street address was 50 Virginia Park Street and was accessible from Virginia Park and through a driveway from Woodward. The motel itself was laid out in the shape of a U, with its office, pool and cabana rooms to the left and a two-storey wing of rooms to the right around its parking lot. The Manor House could be seen from Woodward Avenue. After the riot started, the dramatic singing group left a concert on Saturday, July 22nd, and they all checked in at the Algiers. Three of the members, Ron Banks, Larry Demps and Michael Calhoun, left the 25th, leaving Rederick Davis, Larry Reed and the band's valet, Fred Temple, at the motel. On the evening of July 25th, Motel Annex was occupied by several people who have taken refuge from the rioting. During the rioting, Carl Cooper, 17, a black male, was killed by David Senack. Lee Forsyth, a 20-year-old black male, survived. Michael Clack, 21, black, also survived. Julianne Hysaw, 18, a white female, survived. Carol Marley, 18, white female, survived. Audrey Pollard, 19th, black male, was killed by Ronald August. Robert Lee Green, 26, a black male, a Vietnam War vet, also survived. Larry Reed, a 90-year-old black male singer and member of the Dramatics, survived. Fred Temple, an 18-year-old black male, valet to the Dramatics band, was killed by Robert Pale. Robert Davis, 21, a black male and member of the Dramatics, survived. Charles Moore, who was in his early 40s, black, also survived. And James Sauter, 18, a black male, also survived. On July 25th, 1967, police and National Guardsmen were protecting the Great Lakes Mutual Life building, 1 block north. An insurance company, security guard Melvin Dunmax, was guarding a store across the street from the Algiers. After midnight, shots were heard and guardsman Ted Thomas reported gunfire in the vicinity of Algiers Motel. A large contingent of Detroit police officers, state troopers and guardsmen were ordered to investigate. They observed people in the windows of the Algiers Annex building and subsequently shot out these windows and stormed the building through its 3 entrances. According to testimony, 3 of the black youths, Cooper, Clark and Forsyth, and the 2 white women, Hysaw and Mallory, were listening to music in the 3rd floor room of the annex. Cooper pulled out a starter pistol and shot multiple blanks in the air, drawing return fire from various authorities stationed outside. Alarmed and frightened, the occupants fled to other rooms as law enforcement personnel rushed into the annex. Carl Cooper was the first youth shot to death in the incident. Cooper had been in a 3rd floor room, but his dead body was found in a first floor room A2. He may have been killed by law enforcement personnel when they first entered the building. According to later testimony, he may have been mistaken for an armed rioter. Alternatively, several law enforcement witnesses later testified that Cooper was already dead when they entered the building. The shooting was never fully explained and no one was arrested for Cooper's death. His injuries were consistent with buckshot wounds from a type of shotgun the Detroit Police Department used at the time. In their testimony about the entering of the annex, guardsmen, state troopers and Detroit police officers each testified that they were not the first to enter, stating that Cooper was already dead when they arrived, leaving responsibility for the death unexplained. In the federal conspiracy trial, the defense would attempt to show that Cooper was killed by occupants of the motel before the police arrived, but this was denied by those occupants still staying there. Instead, they testified at least one policeman shot into the room first and checked for persons later. Occupants of the motel's annex were then rounded up in the first floor hallway and lined up against the wall. Various officers presented hit each of the persons in turn, threatening to kill them unless they told the officers who had the gun and were sniping from the hotel. The two 18-year-old women, Judy Heisel and Carol Mallory, were both forcibly stripped naked and each harangued as nigger lovers. Several of the men were shown a knife on the floor and told to pick it up so they could be killed in self-defense. In turn, each of the black youths in the line were taken into rooms and intimidated and with threats or gunshots and told to stay still or be quiet or they'd be killed. The policeman who had escorted the occupant then returned to the hallway, making some comment about the death of the individual. First, per conflicting reports, an officer took one of the youths into the room and fired a shot in the wall to make the prisoners believe he was dead. He then asked Guardsman Ted Thomas if he wanted to kill one. Thomas then took an occupant into the room and shot into the ceiling. Audrey Pollard was taken into the room A3 by Officer Ronald August. August would later admit to Pollard's killing, stating it was self-defense. A spent cartridge found next to Pollard was a .300 Savage, a type used for sporting rifles and not issued to police officers. Pollard had extensive injuries to his head. Witnesses described how he had been beaten in the head with a rifle with force enough to break the rifle. The remaining occupants then admitted that Cooper had a starter pistol and he used it earlier. The sound of gunshots was then heard outside the motel and the police officers left. Two remaining officers escorted remaining prisoners out of the motel annex and told them to run home or they'd be killed too. The death of the third youth, Fred Temple, occurred at the same time or later. Several of the prisoners were allowed to leave, record Temple still being alive when they exited the motel. However, Temple's body was later found in room A3. He had been shot by Officer Robert Pale, who later testified it was in self-defense during a struggle over his gun. The officers did not report the death to the Detroit Police Homicide Bureau as required. The next day, July 26, Charles Hendricks, whose security firm provided security for the Algiers, found the bodies in the annex and reported the death to Wayne County Morgue, which was then called the Detroit Police Homicide Bureau. Detectives Edward Hay, Lyle Tyler, a photographer and several patrolmen arrived around 3 a.m. The scene was examined and the bodies removed. A knife was found next to the body in A2, but no guns were found and the cartridges and shell and casings were left. Security guard Melvin Dismux, who was also black, was first to be charged. He was arraigned for the felonious assault of James Sauter and Michael Clark in the first floor hallway of the annex. He was freed on $1,500 bail. Dismux's trial took place in May 1968. He was found not guilty of the charge of felonious assault. The all-white jury returned the verdict in 13 minutes. The second hometown murders case we're looking at is Benjamin Atkins, often known as Tony. He was born in August 26, 1968 and would later die September 17, 1997. He was also known as the Woodward Corridor Killer, American serial killer and rapist who'd murdered tortured and raped 11 women in Highland Park and Detroit, Michigan during a 9-month period between December 91 and August 92. All of his victims were found in vacant buildings. They'd all been raped and strangled. Most of them had been murdered in a suburb of Highland Park. Many of his victims were sex workers, and Atkins said he was motivated by his hatred of prostitutes. During his trial, it was revealed that Atkins himself had been raped at the age of 10 and had witnessed his mother engage in prostitution. He was convicted of 11 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree sexual conduct and sentenced to 11 life sentences. On September 17, 1997, he died of an infection caused by HIV at Duane Waters Hospital, which is connected with the Algiers Correctional Facility in Jacksonville. Atkins was responsible for the killing of Darlene Saunders. He raped, attacked and sodomized her in October 91 in the Highland Park district. Debbie Ann Friday, 30, was found raped, strangled and sodomized on December 14, 1991 in Highland Park. Bertha Jean Mason, 26, was again found strangled, raped and sodomized on December 30th, 1991 in Detroit. In January 3rd, 1992, Patricia Cannon George, 36, was found strangled, raped and sodomized in Detroit. January 15th, 1992, Vicky Truelove, 39, found sodomized, strangled and raped in Detroit. February 17th, 92, Valerie Chalk, 34, found repeatedly sodomized, raped and strangled at Monterey Motel, room 68, Highland Park. Janita Hardy, 23, was found raped and strangled at Monterey Motel, room 35, on February 17, 1992. On the same day, an unknown female's body was found raped and strangled at the hotel in room 18. April 9th, 1992, in Highland Park, Brenda Mitchell, 28, was found raped and strangled. Vicky Beasley Brown, 27, was found raped and strangled on April 15, 1992, in Highland Park. Joanna O'Rourke, 40, found repeatedly raped, strangled on June 15, 1992, in Highland Park. Ochina Waymer, 21, found beaten, raped and sodomized and strangled on August 21st, 1992 in Highland Park. And Latanya Shawanda Smith, 29, found beaten on August 21st, 1992 in Highland Park. Atkins was also known as the Woodward Avenue Killer. The M1 is a north-south state trunkline highway in the Metro Detroit area in Michigan. This is called Highway Detroit's Main Street. It runs from the northwesterly to the Pontiac. And the last case we're looking at for hometown murders, the Robinson family murders. This is part 1. Part 2 will feature 3 other cases. Make sure you listen to that. But the Robinson family murders, also known as the Good Hart murders, were the mass murders of Richard Robinson, his wife Shirley, and their 4 children, Richie, Gary, Randy and Susan, on June 25th, 1968. They were an upper middle class family from the metropolitan Detroit area of Lathrop Village, Michigan, and were shot and killed while vacationing in their Lake Michigan cottage just north of the Good Hart, Michigan, near the Straits of Mackinac. The case remained unsolved after a 15-month investigation by Michigan State Police and Emmett County Sheriff's Office. However, when the investigation was completed in December 1969, evidence pointed to one person, Joseph Raymond Scalaro III, an embezzling employee of Richard Robinson. The murders began with 5 gunshots aimed at Richard Robinson, fired through a window from a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle. The murderer then entered the cottage through an unlocked door and killed the remaining 5 people with shots to the head from a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Susan and Richard Robinson were also bludgeoned with a hammer found at the murder scene. Shirley Robinson's body was intentionally posed so that when the crime scene was discovered, it would lead the police to think that the crime was part of a sexual attack. Bloody footprints on the floor led to investigators to conclude that one person committed the murders. The bodies were not discovered for 27 days, and conditions at the murder scene resulted in advanced decomposition of the bodies. By the second week of the investigation, which had begun on Monday, July 22nd, 1968, the Michigan State Police and the Emmett County authorities suspected Richard Robinson's employee, Joseph R. Scalaro III, aged 30. He had not been seen or heard from for more than 12 hours on the day of the murders, and his alibi for the time period all proved invalid. He also purchased both of the murder weapons determined by police forensic tests to have been used in the family murders, specifically a .25 caliber jet-fire automatic Beretta pistol and a .22 caliber AR-7 Armalite semi-automatic rifle. The 4.22 caliber spent shells found at the cabin murder scene was forensically compared to their ballistic markings to several .22 caliber evidence shells known to have been fired by Scalaro at a family firing range in 1967, at which time Scalaro used his missing .22 Armalite rifle. The 2 sets of shells were found to be an exact match. Although Scalaro claimed to be giving this weapon away to a neighbour, he told police he'd seen a .2 caliber AR-7 rifle in Scalaro's house not long before the Robinsons were killed. Scalaro's missing .25 caliber Beretta automatic pistol, which he'd also claimed to police had been given away prior to the June 25th murders, was matched forensically in similar class characteristics to a second identical .25 caliber Beretta pistol that he produced for police on the second day after the bodies were found in Good Hart. Both guns had been purchased by Scalaro on the same day, February 2nd, 1968. Also found at the murder scene were several Seiko .25 caliber spent cartridges, a rare 1968 finished brand, sold only for a limited time of a few weeks in Michigan between January and February 1968, prior to the murders. It was documented by investigators that one of the actual few Seiko ammunition purchasers in the Michigan area had been Joseph Scalaro on February 2nd, 1968. Scalaro's statements that he'd been given away both of his missing murder weapons and Seiko ammunition prior to the June 25th, 1968 killings proved invalid. There were one more part of his elaborate scheme to obstruct the investigations of the crime. During the lengthy murder investigation, it was determined by a forensic accountant that more than $60,000 were missing from 2 of the combined businesses of Richard Robinson. The 2 Robinson businesses had been left in the care of the suspect Scalaro prior to the murders. The 2 investigating police agencies involved with the case presented their combined evidence to the judicial prosecution on December 17, 1969. The detailed report implicated Joseph Scalaro as the sole proprietor of the mass murder crime. In mid-January 1970, Emmett County prosecutor Donald C. Nugel decided not to bring charges against Scalaro at the time, citing the 2 missing murder weapons and the absence of fingerprints from the crime scene. During the course of the investigation, the suspect Scalaro failed 2 lie detector tests. A third test was judged inconclusive as to the truth. It also noted he tried to deceive the polygraph interviewers in his pre-test interviews. 2 years later, a newly elected chief prosecutor in Oakland County, L. Brooks Patterson, believed the Robinson crime had originated within his jurisdiction and reopened the prosecution. When the prime suspect Scalaro learned of the impending charge and arrest, he committed suicide on March 8, 1973. Scalaro left behind a typewritten note in which he wrote, quote, "I am a liar, a cheat, a phony," end quote, with a list of people he'd swindled in multiple business schemes. He then added a handwritten note to his mother on the same sheet of paper saying, quote, "I had nothing to do with the Robinsons. I'm a liar but not a murderer. I'm sick and scared. God and everyone, please forgive me," end quote. Since Michigan law does not permit an open murder case to be officially closed, the suicide of the prime suspect, Scalaro, placed the case in an inactive file. Thus, many questions remain unanswered. Over many years, other crime theories have sufficed, but none have ever been substantiated. Those who personally knew Mr. Robinson were quoted in the 2 police reports filed on the case as saying they had never known a better family friend, a man or business partner. Thank you for listening to Hometown Murders. Please make sure you subscribe and listen, and we'll have the second part out next Monday. Thank you for everybody who's listened to this episode. This episode has been researched, written and hosted by me, Andrew Knight. Sound, music and editing has been provided by Harry Edmondson. Make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere where you listen to your podcast. This allows the episode to be downloaded automatically as soon as it's released. Please reach out to us on the social media. We're at Hometown Murders on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. Please support the show by leaving a 5-star rating or a review. It really does help.